So, who grew up playing hide and seek? Look at you. A few people didn't raise their hand, and that's a little weird. That's just a little strange. So, I grew up in the country in very small town, very rural Alabama. I know you think all of Alabama is rural, but it's not. It's not. But out in the country, and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and everybody was all in this little one red light town with a post office and a grocery store and a feed mill. And so, growing up in itty-bitty Alabama like that, my first cousins were also my first friends. And we played hide and seek like it was our job. My grandparents had 80 acres and this great big barn, a couple of barns and hills and stuff, but these old junk cars that my uncles drove at some time 100 years ago. And we would go hide in the barn and hide in the cars and hide under the carport and hide in the field and hide down by the lake and everywhere you can think of, playing hide and seek. And it was just so much fun. Who's played sardines? Okay, less people. That's kind of what I figured. So, I didn't know about sardines until I was in Bible college. Why are we laughing? Are we laughing because of sardines? Okay, I'll explain. So, I didn't know about sardines until I was in Bible college. And our school was sponsored by a mega church in Birmingham. And so, the most fun thing in the whole world is to go play sardines at night after the church is closed down, everybody's gone home, and it's this dark, really, look, a church after dark is really creepy, okay? I'm just going to say it. Especially when the light's kind of eking in the stained glass, and like Jesus is hanging up there. It's just creepy. So sardines, for those of you who haven't played or don't know, sardines is basically the opposite of hide and seek. Hide and seek, you've got one person who's it trying to find everybody else. With sardines, you've got one person going to hide, and everyone else is looking for that one person. And as you find them, you stay with them. And you stay quiet. So you hope it's not a really tiny space. But you stay with them until everybody ends up there with that original person who was hiding. Sardines. So here's what I have come to believe. That God has been playing sardines with us since the beginning of time. Whatever causes us to hide, whatever causes us shame, whatever causes us to disconnect from those around us, to feel like we have to wear that mask to be accepted in church, not here, other churches. Whatever that is, God just wants to play sardines with us and come get down in there with us and go, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about this. I'm staying with you. I don't know who else is coming, but I'm here. I think that's kind of the point. So, my favorite story in the Bible of people playing sardines is Hagar. Who knows Hagar? Okay, if I get it wrong, just keep smiling. So, Hagar is this Egyptian slave. She is Sarah's slave. She's technically Sarai's slave, but we're going to say Sarah and Abraham today. So she is Sarah's slave. Sarah is her master, not Abraham. And, Sarah and Abraham, they have this promise that they're going to have all these kids. A mess of kids, we'd say in Alabama. They're going to have a whole mess of kids. And they haven't had even the first kid in this mess yet. And Sarah is frustrated. I think she's a little embarrassed. She's probably heartbroken. And she eventually says, Abraham, take Hagar, the Egyptian slave, and have a child with her. Let us have a son with Hagar. And so Abraham takes Hagar, and she does become pregnant. And Hagar is only doing what her master has told her to do, but Sarah becomes pretty ticked off, jealous. And the King James says something like in her jealousy, she treats Hagar poorly. Now, Can we be real this morning? Hagar's a slave who had no choice about getting pregnant. She's a slave, and so treating her miss poorly is not like, you're not going to get supper tonight. She treats her so poorly that Hagar flees into the desert in fear of her life. So I get curious, what does poor mistreatment of a slave look like? Well, I don't know how to go find first-person slave narratives from Egyptian slaves way back then, but the University of the South has this online collection of first-person slave narratives from the Civil War, the very uncivil war. And so you can go read this extensive collection of first-person slave narratives. And so I'm looking for what mistreatment of a slave, specifically what mistreatment of a pregnant slave might look like. The stories are horrifying. I don't know how you can read them and not cry. They are unthinkable. Well, there's a story of a slave who's caught and brought back, and she's nailed by her earlobes to a tree. There's a story of a slave who's caught, a runaway, and brought back and strung by her thumbs from the ceiling and hung there until, I guess, they felt like it had been long enough. And then there's a story of a pregnant slave. And the story goes that they dug a hole in the ground, placed this pregnant slave face down, abdomen in the hole, and gave her 25 lashes. A pregnant woman. Now, I don't know how bad it was for Hagar, but it was bad enough that she fled pregnant, hot, desperate, into the desert. I imagine it had to be pretty bad. I can't imagine that she wouldn't have endured it if she hadn't feared for the safety of her child. That's my thinking. So she's in the desert, running, wandering, not sure where she's going, but she's just got to get away from this horrible slave master, Sarah. And God shows up. God shows up in the desert of her desperation. And Hagar, the Egyptian slave, this unsung hero, one of my favorite women in the whole book, she's the first person to rename God, or to name God from her own experience. And she says, you are El Roy, R-O-I. You are El Roy. You are the God who sees me. You are the God who sees me. When I feel completely unseen, when I don't feel heard, when I don't feel accepted, when I don't feel loved, when I feel anything but those things, you, God, come and play sardines. You come and find me in this desert, longing to die, longing for anything but where I am, because home is no longer safe. I no longer feel safe in my own skin. And you, God, you see me. I love that story. So, my big question for today, I gotta have some coffee. My big question for today is, how many people do we know? How many people do you know who are feeling like Hagar? Not seen, not heard, not accepted, not loved. Feeling like I've just got to run away because home's not safe anymore. I'm not safe in my own skin. There are 2 times in my life that I remember not feeling safe in my own skin. The first was when I was about 3 or 4. I was a preschooler, and I was molested by the neighbor boy who was 17. And I didn't remember it for a long time. A lot of those years is just blacked out because of trauma. I actually didn't remember it until I was a senior in high school. I was a senior the first time I had a flashback. I started having these flashes of memory, and I'm seeing and hearing and living this thing all over again. It's like a nightmare, but I'm wide awake. That's the first time I felt unsafe in my own skin. The second time I didn't feel safe in my own skin, I was 29. 2 hours from home in a hotel room. My mental illness was just at a fever pitch. Depression was just wanting to drag me down and keep me in bed all the time. Anxiety was screaming white noise in my ears. The flashbacks, the PTSD was just out of control. And I just lost my job. So I found this contract job for 2 weeks. I have been a sign language interpreter for many years now. And so I found this contract gig interpreting 2 hours from home, and I'm staying in this hotel room, and the mental illness is out of control, and I've just lost my job, and I'm feeling lonely and rejected and not seen and not heard, and I'm scared to death for anybody to know what's going on with me because, oh, by the way, I was a pastor and a worship leader. And I was scared to death for anybody, especially anybody in the church, to know what was going on. Because I grew up in this subculture of Christianity, very charismatic, very Pentecostal, and anything that we don't understand, we just slap a demon on it. And you could be Christian, the way I was brought up, or you could be crazy, but you couldn't be both. Crazy is a terrible word that we shouldn't use. I'm just using it for an example. So I'm in this hotel room in what Brene Brown calls a shame spiral. Any Brene Brown fans? Yes. Next time I come back, lots more hands are going to know Brene Brown. So Brene Brown has written multiple wonderful, transformative, amazing books. Daring Greatly, The Gifts of Imperfection, Braving the Wilderness, several really, really wonderful books. And she talks about the shame spiral. She's a shame researcher, so all of her work is around shame and vulnerability. But she talks about the shame spiral. And so I've got this mental illness stuff going on. I've got this rejection from work, and shame comes in and starts telling us the things that shame says. You're not enough. If you were just man enough, you could beat this. If you were just Christian enough, if you just had enough faith, if you just prayed hard enough, everything's about enough, not being enough. It's all about your lack. So guilt says I've done something bad. Shame says I am bad. And not just bad, I'm worthless. I'm just a piece of crap. And so those are the lies that I'm believing in this hotel room all by myself, 5 hours a night for 2 weeks. And I'm just spiraling out of control. And I finally believed those lies. I finally said, you know what? I got this beautiful, strong, smart, independent 27-year-old wife at home who can start over. She can have a normal husband. Normal is another one of those words we should remove from our vocabulary. I think it's Anne Lamott that says normal is just a setting on a dryer. Yeah. But I thought she can start over. She can have this normal husband and a normal life. And this little bitty boy who would turn a year old the next day, he can have a normal dad. He'll never remember me. And so I tried to die by suicide that night in a hotel room. And I woke up about 24 hours later in a fog. I say I woke up. I was in and out. In an ICU room in the hospital, numb from the waist down, couldn't feel my legs for 3 days. Hooked up to all sorts of machines, trying to figure out if my liver was going to fail or not. And my wife's there, and her best friend's there. And I was so angry. Anybody that tells you that people who attempt suicide are just looking for attention, they have no idea what they're talking about. And you tell them they're wrong. They're dead wrong. No one wants to die. No one wants that attention. We, at the very core of who we are as humans, have this incredible will to live in the face of all sorts of adversity. So when somebody gets to the point where they even say, I think I want to die, it's not normal. It's not okay. They need help. So I wake up and I'm so mad. I'm mad at God. I'm mad at myself. I feel more like a failure than I've ever felt in my whole life because I can't even get a suicide right. Are you kidding me? My wife and her best friend stayed overnight. They slept in folding chairs that night. Somehow got special permission from the nurses to stay in ICU. And the next day they went back and gave my little boy his first birthday party without me. And somewhere between day 2 and day 3, I'm lying in that hospital room. It's cold because hospitals are always so cold. And I'm looking out the window. It's rainy. Of course it's rainy. I'm looking out the window, freezing cold. My heart is as cold as my body. I just feel numb. And all of a sudden I feel this warm hand on my chest, as real as this hand on my chest right here. And you can say it was meds, maybe it was pizza from the night before. But I feel this warm hand, and I hear this inaudible voice say, I'm not finished with you yet. I'm not finished with you yet. And it couldn't be me because I hated myself. Hated myself. All I wanted to do was get out of there so I could finally die. But God showed up in the desert like he did with Hagar. Like he did in the belly of the whale with Jonah. Showed up and said, I'm not finished with you yet. Your story isn't over. Let me put a semicolon where you've put a period because there's more to be written here. And life is really hard and unthinkable and unfair. You know, Jesus promised that, right? In this world you will have trouble. We want to skip over it because we don't like lament. We don't like suffering. We want joy unspeakable and full of glory every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But Jesus said, in this world, you are going to have hard times, bad days, bad months, bad seasons. Unthinkable things are going to happen. We want to skip over that and get to, but take heart, I've overcome the world. It's true. He has, and it's wonderful. But what do we do with those people who are in that in-between space? What do we do when it's us, when we're in the trouble and God seems gone? Checked out. Where are you? What is happening? So Jesus shows up and says, I'm not finished with you yet. And so the last 7 years, 7.5 now, have been lots of recovery. Lots of really uncomfortable honesty. Weekly individual therapy, weekly marriage counseling. Understanding what shame is. It wasn't depression that nearly killed me. It wasn't anxiety that nearly killed me. It wasn't PTSD that nearly killed me. It was the shame of all those things that nearly killed me. And so, learning to tell the truth, getting out of a really toxic church with really toxic theology, and finding a place that believes in love-based theology, this crazy thought that the love of God is unconditional, crazy, so heretical, that the work Jesus did on the cross is final and we're accepted exactly as we are. Wow, what a thought. But I didn't know those things. The way I was raised, it was all about outward behavior. It was all about checking every little box and knowing the right scriptures to quote, and knowing the right prayer to pray, and knowing when to stand, sit, kneel. All of those things are what counted, and we don't really want to know about your mess. Keep that quiet and just do what you're supposed to do. And so, for me now, the Christian life is messy. And if it can't be messy, I don't want to be a part of it. If God isn't willing to meet me in the pig pen like the prodigal son, then what are we doing? What do we do? Why are we here? If we can't embrace one another in our mess, in our pain, in our woundedness, in our trauma, big T, little t, it doesn't matter. If we can't embrace people and be embraced where we are, what are we doing here? Singing a few songs and eating some bread and drinking some grape juice? What are we doing? So, I'm really passionate about helping churches learn how to become a safe place where people can be vulnerable, where we can show up in our not enoughness and be loved for as long as it takes, whatever that looks like. I wrote this article for USA Today a few months ago about how the church should operate more like a psych ward. What? For me, the psych ward was this place that practiced radical acceptance. Now look, some people have had terrible experiences in psych wards. I got really lucky and had a fantastic experience. So Sport is this place where we practice radical acceptance. We are housed with other people, usually at the very end of their rope, looking for mutual support. Just looking for somebody to say, you know what, today's not okay. I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, but we're here. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to make sure you're eating, right? Just basic things. We're going to make sure you're eating, getting a nap, taking your meds on time every day. We're going to do things like that. We're going to talk about how you feel, happy, sad, mad, or glad. We might do some silly things like cut out words from a magazine and glue it on construction paper. And I called it the arts and crafts floor for a long time because of that. But the psych ward is really this gift. When you find a good one, it's a gift. Just like a mental health diagnosis is a gift for a lot of people. Because we've been struggling and suffering for all these years, and what is wrong with me? And suddenly you get a diagnosis and you go, oh my gosh, it's like putting on glasses for the first time. Now all that struggle makes sense, and now I know how to take care of myself. I need to get on that medication. I need to go see that doctor. I need to go see my therapist. These are the things I need to do to be the best human I can be. Because if I'm not a healthy human, it's really hard to be a healthy Christian, because we're human first. But we are. And so we have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of one another. I have gone on a rabbit trail, friends. I have no idea where I am in these notes. My God. Okay, let's talk about what doesn't work for people in struggle. What doesn't work? So maybe you're here and you don't have a mental health diagnosis. You've never had a lived experience with mental illness. You don't know anybody who's ever been suicidal. But you're also not a jerk. And so you want to love, you want to help, you want to support. What do I do? What do I not do? What do I even say? So here's a few things not to do. Don't just quote a cherry-picked scripture. Not helpful. Wait, don't quote scripture? Yeah, don't. Don't quote a cherry-picked scripture when someone is in crisis, because it's usually not helpful. Don't tell them to just pray harder. Don't tell them to just choose joy. Don't do it. Ask them what they need. What do you need from me? I don't have the answers. I don't know what this is like. I've never lived this, but I love you. I care about you. I'm not going anywhere. Can you tell me what you need? How can I support you? That's really all you have to do. That's really it. What else can you do? We talked about radical acceptance. Oh man, we sang a song this morning about Come As You Are. And it's on like countless church signs all over the place. What if it was true? What if we meant it? What if we said, come as you are on the church sign, and we meant it? Not come as you are, and you can sit back for a couple weeks. But what if we really meant, come as you are? Oh man, it's the church's greatest slogan, and most of the time it's our biggest lie. Come as you are. Jesus said something like that, I think. So, what else? How else can we be safe? I'll tell you this. The church isn't looking for Starbucks in the foyer. Hurting people aren't looking for that from your church. They're not looking for fog machines and purple lights and skinny jeans. They're not looking for all that. Like, oh, that's fine. You can do it. You can wear a Daddy Shark t-shirt if you want to. You can. But none of that matters to the person in crisis who shows up holding their breath going, oh, God, my life is falling apart at the seams, and I've just barely got enough energy to walk through the door. They don't care about any of that other stuff. They care about you going, welcome, 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 and following up with them after it's over, checking on them, right? Not fixing it, not having all the answers. A hurting person doesn't need you to be their psychiatrist or their therapist. They hopefully already have one. You don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to expect our pastors to have all the answers and be the expert in all things, because it's totally not fair, by the way. Totally not fair. But when we don't know what to do, we connect them with someone who does. We find an Aaron. We find a doctor, a therapist, someone who knows more about this than we do, who is safe, and we get them there. Or we bring in the professionals, or we bring in people with lived experience who can say, here's a little slice of my story. Here's what I wish you knew. That's what we do. We start saying things like suicide, depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar from the pulpit. Check, you did it. But don't let this be the only time that you talk about these things. Don't let me be the token crazy guy, right? Talk about these things regularly. Because the truth is, 1 in 5 this year in your church will experience some kind of mental illness. Every day across Canada, the average of 10 people die by suicide. And for every one person who dies by suicide, 20 more attempt. Every day. Around the globe, every 40 seconds, someone dies by suicide. I don't know how long I've been talking, but a lot of people have died just in the time I've been standing here. So don't let this be a country club. Let this be a hospital. Let this be a hospital for hurting people. And if you're not hurting right now, thank God. Go love on somebody who is. And don't put your expectations on them. We talked about this yesterday in the workshop. When it comes to things like unresolved grief, prolonged grief, chronic illness, mental illness, things are going to last a while. Our temptation is to walk in and approach that hurting person with our expectations of what their process should look like. That's right, speaking Canadian. So we walk in with our expectation, right? Like if you walk in to the Old Navy in Birmingham, Alabama, or you walk in the Old Navy in Toronto or wherever it is up here, it's going to look exactly the same if they've done it right. The district managers walked in and said, this thing's on aisle 1, that's on aisle 2, kids are in the back, here's the sale rack, men are over here, women are over there, cashier's in the front. It's going to look exactly the same because it's a schematic. But grief and sorrow and suffering have no schematic. Because we're all different. Because we've all got different experiences. We've all got different pains, different joys, different hopes, different disappointments. So don't approach a hurting person with your expectations. Again, what do you need? How can I help? How can I be of service? And then try to fill that gap. Let me pull these notes back up, and I'm going to wrap this baby up. You were looking for a happy little sermon this morning, weren't you? Oh, let me tell you a few of these real fast. I asked a few people online, what are you looking for in a safe community? What does a safe community look like for you? Whether that's a church or AA or NA or Celebrate Recovery or whatever it is, what's a safe community look like for you? A safe place to land. I need to know others around who are willing to listen, right? Biggest advice, stop talking and start listening. Biggest piece of advice. I need to hear the story of others. So I want my pastor to stand up here and say, hey, let me tell you about this struggle I had. That's what I want. The next person said, we don't all have to think the same or believe the same because we're all adults. Oh my gosh. Can we tell that? Never mind, I'm going to leave it. I'm not talking politics today. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm from America. I need someone to sit beside me on the mourning bench. I need a safe community where I can be real, love Jesus, where it's okay to be me and heal. A place where it's okay to not be okay. And the last one, I just need the community to not give up on me. I'm good enough at that myself. I'm good enough at that myself. 4 questions I'd love for you to ask yourselves as a group sometime. I'd love for church staff and the board to sit down and ask these questions and have a discussion around your thoughts about these 4 questions. What can we count on each other for? Now you're thinking about your church. You're thinking about this community right here. What can we count on each other for? Be honest, don't dress it up. What can we count on each other for? What is our team's purpose? Or what is our church's purpose? What's our community's purpose? What is the reputation we aspire to have? So maybe we're not there yet, but who do we want to be known as? What do we want to be known for? People are going to talk about you, so what do you want them to say? And finally, what do we need to do differently to achieve that reputation or fulfill our purpose? Those are the questions. And if you want those after this, I'll be glad to give them to you. So really, in a nutshell, hurting people, they need your presence. not your gifts, but your presence show up, and they need your compassion. That's it. If you show up, you're there, even when it's yucky and nasty and you don't understand and it's a little confusing and oh my gosh, this is really awkward. Show up anyway and be compassionate. Oh man, you take their living hell, right? Because they're not worried about the hell after you die because they're already living it. You take that living hell and you make those flames go down just a bit every time you show up and you're compassionate. Jesus does that with the man in John 5, the man who was invalid for 38 years. He's sitting at the pool of Bethesda, just wishing he could get in when the angel comes and stirs the water. 38 years is a long time, by the way. I'll be 38 next year. That's a long time. Anybody who's been married 38 years goes, yeah, it's a long time. 38 years is a long time. And this guy's just wishing he could get in the pool so that he could be healed. And along comes Jesus, and I love what Jesus does, playing sardines with this guy. Get up, take your mat, and come with me. Bring your mat with you. Not that mat. Bring your mat with you. Why is that significant? Because Jesus isn't saying, leave your experience behind. Oh, hey, let's not talk about that. No, bring your mat. Bring your experience. Bring your story, because other people are going to need to hear it about how God met you in the desert of your desperation, Hagar. Bring that story with you and open up and share. When people are safe, open up and share with them and tell them about this God who is a very present help in time of need. That's what we have to do. Bring it with you. Come on, we want to hear it. I want to hear about what you've been going through. Even if I don't understand, just tell me. I'm listening. Help me understand. Tell me more about that.